So I forgot to say in the last video that along with these videos and this PowerPoint as a whole on Veracross, I'll also be putting note outlines, and so you can, as I go through these videos and as you look over these PowerPoints, you can fill in these note outlines by yourself, and it'll be a good way to have your own notes, and it will help with note taking as well. Alright, so there are 3 different types of tissues. We've talked about tissues before. Tissues are just specialized cells that can be used for different functions throughout. Like in the human body, tissues, you have your skin. Organs in your body are made up of different types of tissue cells. But in a plant's body, you have 3 different types of tissue systems, right? You have your dermal tissue system. So this is going to be the outer covering of a plant. Remember, the next one also have, I'll explain this as well, in order to kind of help with note taking and organization of the PowerPoint, because there's a lot of vocabulary. I kind of underline the things that I think are important and will help as you studying, just like kind of block out some of the fluff material and really focus on what you need to know. Anyways, number 1, dermal tissue system. This is the protective outer layer of a plant. Your second type of tissue system is your ground tissue system, right? This is going to make the inside parts of a lot of, so this right here, this is a cross section of this plant right here, right? And so if you cut it right here on this part and then look at it from a vertical view, this is what you're going to see, right? So this green part on the outside, this is the epidermis. This inside part is what's called the ground tissue. It's going to make up a lot of the inside parts of the plant. And finally, you have your vascular, there it is, your vascular system, right? So you have things that are transporting water, minerals, organic compounds. These organic compounds are most likely sugar, could be proteins, nucleic acids, anything that we talked about in the first section of the year. Yeah, those are the 3 main types of tissues. I'm starting off with the dermal tissue system. Like I said, this tissue covers the outside of a plant's body. And a lot of things, a lot of parts of biology, when you hear the word dermis, it's probably referring to outside covering. Like even dermal tissue on a plant forms what's called the skin or the epidermis. So epidermal layer. Anything that when you see that word, just kind of think outside covering. We've talked about cuticle as one of the 4 main adaptations, and this is also part of that dermal tissue system. So in this diagram, you can see the cuticle, which is that waxy layer that prevents water loss and kind of protects the stems and leaves as well. So you have one on top of if this is like an examination of a leaf, you're going to have one on top of the leaf right here, and then also one underneath. Right here, this opening is actually a stomata, and we'll talk a lot about that as well as we move on. Also, on the dermal tissue system, you're going to have these small hair-like extensions, and these guys are really important because they help to slow water loss, and they also increase water absorption. So they have kind of 2 functions: preventing water loss and increasing water absorption. This is not a good picture to use for this word cork, but cork cells kind of contain a waterproof chemical and are not covered by a waxy cuticle. Mainly found in woody stems, and it seems kind of weird to call things in biology woody and non-woody, but woody stems is referring to things found in trees, some shrubs, things like that, whereas non-woody is going to be flowers, fruits, things like that are going to have non-woody stems and roots. But anyways, in woody stems, you have what's called cork, and then what else? Make sure that was good there. Functions in gas. Yeah, so dermal tissue is going to help function in gas exchange and the absorption of mineral nutrients. So specifically with gas exchange in the dermal tissue, stomata are going to be used. Next we have the ground tissue system. So this is that second of the 3 tissue systems in a plant. Like I said, it makes up most of the inside plants. It's going to consist of thin-walled cells. This is really important, that thin-walled cells that remain alive and keep their nucleus after they mature. The reason it has to stay thin is so that it can provide support to the vascular tissues without taking up a lot of space. And it kind of depends where it's on in the plant. So some of it can have thin walls, whereas some of it, depends on where it's at, can have thick walls. This part right here, ground tissue, has different function depending on where it is located in a plant. That's really important, and we'll talk about the different functions they have next. So there's 3 different types of ground tissues. Well, actually, I won't say 3 different types of ground tissues. They can be found in 3 different parts of the plant. And I've kind of color-coded this so you can see where each of it is. So like with the ground tissue and leaves, those guys are going to be packed, they're going to be extremely packed with chloroplasts. And I wish I could zoom in on here. But these little green dots are those chloroplasts, and that's needed specifically for photosynthesis. Those leaves, as we said earlier in PowerPoints, they're going to be performing the most photosynthesis in the plant, and so they need a lot of chloroplast, and that chloroplast is found within the ground tissue cells. Next, you have ground tissue in your stems and roots. So moving down to here, these are going to function mainly in the storage of water, sugar, and starch. Starch is just another type of sugar, but this, I've kind of pointed it in this yellowish area right here. This is your ground tissue moving around here. And then finally, in the body of a plant, so this big stem right here, the ground tissue there is going to function as a support for the third kind of vascular plant tissue, which is, we'll talk about that next. And we'll also kind of talk about why these look different, right? This is a dicot stem, and this is a monocot stem, and we'll talk about that as we move on. Finally, vascular tissue system. This is the third type of vascular tissue, and you have 2 kinds of vascular tissues. These words xylem and phloem are going to be really big moving forward. So xylem and phloem, both are the 2 types of vascular tissue. So they're going to have different strands of cells. They look different between xylem and phloem, right? This one kind of looks continuous, although it's not. And phloem vessels are going to have specific cells stacked on top of each other. I said earlier that the vascular tissue system kind of works as a highway, right? You're transporting nutrients, minerals, sugar, water, whatever it is, you're transporting that throughout the plant. But I can't remember who said it, but someone else also said it kind of works as a pipe system or a plumbing system, and that's a very good analogy as well. So this plumbing system is carrying fluids, dissolved substances throughout a plant's body. Xylem, I kind of wrote up here, and I'll get to that in a second, but xylem has thick-walled cells right here, these things called tracheids, that conduct specifically water and mineral nutrients. But the main thing I want you to know is xylem is transporting water. So when you think of xylem, think about transporting water, and it's going specifically or strictly from the plant's roots all the way from its stems and into its leaves. So it's only transporting in one direction. Xylem is going in one direction from the plant's roots all the way to its leaves, and it's only specifically transporting water. Okay. At maturity, this one is big as well. All that is left of these cells is kind of just their cell wall. So there's nothing really in them because they've lost their membrane nucleus cytoplasm before they can conduct water. So once they reach maturity, all that's left of the cells are their cell walls. And then one type of cell, there's different types, but the main type that's found in all plants is what's called a tracheid, right? And so these vascular or xylem cells are at a slanted angle, and these pores right here are allowing this water to go from here, go across, and keep going in the same direction. These tracheids, like I was just talking about, they're going to be narrow, elongated, and this word tapered just means they kind of are at a slanted angle at each end. Water is going to flow from one trachea to the next through pits, which are thin areas in the cell walls. I'm not going to expect you to know a whole lot of this, but these vessel cells are important as well, right? So you have Your xylem right here. Vessel cells are actually going to be found in what's called shrubs and flowering plants, right? There was a different scientific word underneath that. I'm not going to require you to know that. We've talked about that. But shrubs and flowering plants have a different type of xylem cell, or actually a second type of xylem cell called vessels. And so these vessels are going to be wider than tracheids and have large perforations in their ends. Shrubs and flowering plants, this actually makes sense because they're going to be smaller, and since their cells aren't going to be as long, since they're going to be wide, that's going to keep them small and allows them to move water more quickly when they need it, right? This is kind of just an explanation. You have your tracheids right here, they're tapered. The cytoplasm is absent, and these are your vessels, right? You see how they're wider and more compact. Yep. The other type that we talked about earlier is phloem. Phloem is going to, instead of transporting water throughout the plant, it is transporting sugar. We're going to talk about this picture right here, probably actually at the end of the PowerPoint. But phloem is transporting sugar, not just in one direction, but it can transport it from the leaves to the roots, and then also from the roots to the stems, and roots to the leaves as well, and also to the stems if needed. Phloem contains cells that conduct sugars and other nutrients throughout the plant's body. Like I just said, conducting cells of a phloem have a cell wall, a cell membrane, and cytoplasm. So that's different than the cells, or that's different than tracheids and vessels of the xylem, because those did not, like once they hit maturity, they didn't have anything except for the cell wall. These cells, however, are going to lack organelles or have modified organelles based on where they're at in the plant. Conducting strands in phloem are called sieve tubes. So in xylem you had your main one called tracheids, but in phloem your main cells are going to be called sieve tubes, and I kind of circled them right here in purple as well. These are your sieve tubes, which are basically pores in the walls between neighboring sieve tube cells, connect the cytoplasms and allow substances to pass freely from cell to cell. So because of these sieve tubes, not a lot of energy is going to be needed to pass sugars between cell to cell. Some energy is going to be needed, but not a whole lot because of these sieve tubes. Beside the sieve tubes are rows of companion cells, and I circled those in this orangish yellowish color. So you have a row of companion cells, and then a row of sieve tubes, row of companion cells, sieve tubes, companion cells, and so it kind of alternates between rows. These companion cells are important because they're going to carry out cellular respiration, protein synthesis, and other functions that the plant needs to live. And so as these sugars are going between sieve tubes, right, the companion cells are like, say if this picture was to extend all the way up and there was a companion cell up here that needed, we'll say sugar or protein or whatever it is. It says, hey, I need some protein or sugar up here. One of these sieve tubes can pass along all the way up to here and then transport it in this companion cell if it was needed. This is just an overview slide. This is a table to kind of help you remember what cell types are going to be in there. Your dermal cells. Your dermal tissue has epidermal, guard cells, and cork cells. Vascular tissue is going to have vessel cells, tracheids, sieve tubes, and companion cells. And your ground tissue is going to have mesophyll, cortex cells, and pith cells. Yep, this is the first video for the different types of tissue systems. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions.